Let's talk. Your health and wellness podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode in our Let's Talk podcast series on health and wellness matters, where we're trying to cover all topics health and wellness that's meaningful for you, the listener. And we've really we've covered quite a few different areas over the last couple of weeks, and it's a great honor just to have with me on the podcast today Grant Austin, who heads up a national network of gyms as well and is very experienced in the field. And we're going to be talking about screening, why screening matters, and the importance of screening and health screening, both general health screening and how it relates to gyms. Grant, great to have you in the studio, and look forward to unpacking this topic here this evening.
Thank you, everyone. Great to be here.
So I think what's important for our listeners is, and I'll try and put a spin onto it, and then you can tackle as well. Really, what is screening, and why is it actually important? Really, being in the medical world and in the health and wellness space, it's quite essential that individuals have regular health checkups, right, for early detection and prevention of illnesses. And I was doing some stats and research on some stats that show really individuals who undergo regular screenings have a 30 to 40% higher chance of catching illness at treatable stages. And I think that's a very important stat. And I think if everyone knew that, I think maybe people would be more proactive and make sure they actually go for their screening checkups. But I think that's an important point to start with, Grant. And I don't know what experience you've had in your health and wellness field in terms of how people feel about screening, and do they feel it's important?
Well, everyone with our gyms, we do a PARQ form with every new member that joins. So that's a physical activity readiness questionnaire. So that's an abbreviation of that, and we get incredibly interesting results out of that. And the PARQs have a lot of questions on that. Questions obviously about the individual's current health. It also has questions on their family's health, because some diseases run in families. And we get really, really interesting stats on that. We capture that all digitally, so we're able to compare. I think we've got about 26,000 PARQs that are captured currently over the last couple of years. And it's super interesting to see what the results are.
We obviously know you capture it. Do the members ask for that or look at it or understand? Do you feel that members of your health gyms, etc., do they understand the importance of screening?
Yeah, so what we do is if there's, X number of questions answered yes, or they have this or they have that, or that this is in their families, we generally try to direct them to their GP to clear them, before they start to exercise. We have, it's very seldom that we have to do that though. And then obviously if they have answered yes to certain questions, more specifically around injuries and stuff like that, we refer them to a professional personal trainer to help them with those injuries so that we don't exacerbate that problem. We assist them with, sorting out that problem.
Sure. And I want to talk a bit about the importance of early detection. We'll obviously go through some of, the different screening, what's required at different ages. But certainly, there's some overwhelming stats, as I spoke about, that 70% of deaths globally are caused by preventable chronic diseases. Which is incredible. And a lot of those chronic diseases could be prevented or certainly could be treated earlier if you screened. 5% breast cancer detected early has a 5-year survival rate of over 90%. Colon cancer, if you screen and you pick it up, you can reduce mortality by 30 to 40%. So it's not just about living longer, which we've spoken a lot about in our podcast series. It's about health span. It's about being healthier as you live through your decades. So it really is important. We know that there some organizations and medical funds obviously also place an importance in encouraging individuals to do those screenings. But it really is about, it will decrease morbidity and mortality. It improves quality of life for sure, in terms of picking up these chronic diseases earlier, such as strokes, heart attacks, kidney failure, and of course cost that both for the individual and for the funds. Screening is important. And just to bring, we obviously saw in COVID was quite an interesting period of time where where natural screenings didn't happen or happened at a much lower rate. And I think we're seeing implications of that now still in terms of an increased incidences in chronic diseases and diseases that are much further down the line in terms of their disease stage.
Avron, I think, that the screening is so important because there's oftentimes that you have absolutely no clue, and I have personal experience of this, that perhaps one of your bodily functions, for example, I had an issue with liver function. Now, I'm an exceptionally healthy person. I'm 59 years old, but I'm the strongest I've ever been in my entire life. I'm in the best shape I've ever been in, and yet I have a issue with my liver function, which was a massive surprise to me. So, you can't take on face value and think, well, I'm a healthy person, I eat healthy, I exercise every day, etc., etc. Everything's just in order. You actually have to do that screening to catch that. And like you alluded to just now, some of the big medical aids, I mean, Discovery Health is in, I think, something like 117 different countries. They're an absolute specialist on health screening, and they go the whole route, so they understand your health screening. They do it once a year. They understand the medications that you're taking because they tapped into all of the big pharmacies, etc., etc. They're into all the doctors, and that makes a really, really, really big difference. So you can't just take it for granted that you feel healthy and look healthy, that you are healthy. That's just one of those things that you have to accept.
Sure. Yeah, I think your example is a great example to give, and certainly being in the medical field, there have been many individuals that we've picked up conditions through screening where you just wouldn't have expected it. And as you say, outside health isn't always an indicator of inside what's going on. And it really, and I've seen this in terms of treating patients, it has such a significant impact earlier to pick up a disease earlier on, in terms of treating it, be it your diabetes, your hypertension, cancer. We'll talk about all the different types of screenings as we go through it. But I think screening really takes medicine from sort of the curative phase to preventative phase. And I know gyms are also, there's a lot of work that's happening around preventative health and medicine. But certainly in the medical world, there's a lot of catch up there that had to happen, but it really takes it into that phase, about what can I do actually to prevent me getting ill and these chronic diseases, and screening is one of them.
I think also, everyone, what's important is, with all love and respect to a GP, they sometimes don't have the tools to interpret the screening that you do. So you go for a batch of blood tests, and your GP might say to you, well, you have high blood pressure, cut out salt, or this or that, or the next thing. But when you really engage with a specialist who understands what those indicators mean, they're able to sort of track down and pinpoint the issues that you have. And also, my personal experience is that my guy that I go to has taken steps and looked at various different options. So it's not a case of cut out everything. It's a case of, right, let's start cutting out stuff and seeing what makes the difference. Because you don't want, people don't want to sacrifice lifestyle, which you completely understand. So if you're having the correct screening and the person that's interpreting that is the right person, they're able to then get to the root cause of it and go through a series of different interventions and look at which intervention makes the difference. And in my personal case, that's been what it is. And, I appreciate that. You have to go to the right person, get the right screening, get the right interpretation, and that makes all the difference in my experience.
And I think that's so important, Grant. I mean, there's one thing doing the test, but who's reading it, who's analyzing, who's advising you on it, is very important. We know that, as we said, a lot of the medical funds say, go once a year and do all these tests, but who really analyzes it? And what does that result mean? And I do want to speak a bit about that. Just before we go into the exact more specifics around the test, because just because you're in the normal range doesn't mean you shouldn't intervene. And I'll give an example. Let's say your cholesterol we know should be less. Let's take a 5. There are debates around, but let's say the upper end of cholesterol, what your result should be is around 5. Let's say you're at 4.9. Does that mean you shouldn't do anything? You're at the upper end of the curve just because it sits in the normal range. Wouldn't you prefer a cholesterol of 2.5 or 3? So it doesn't mean you shouldn't move the mark. We know that there's sort of a normal bell distribution curve. Most people will be in the middle, people at either ends. And certainly you in the population, you don't necessarily want to be that person who's right just at the borderline that something can happen and you suddenly have that chronic disease, blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes. You can be right at the borderline, but you actually doesn't mean you shouldn't intervene. And that's an important point. It's who's interpreting the test and what interventions you're gonna make.
100% agree. You certainly don't want to be right close to the border, and the question is, how did you get there? So
Yes,
that has to be understood and interpreted.
exactly. So it's about so far what we've seen is that do the test, do the screening, do it regularly, but make sure that you're actually taking the results. You're checking it with a suitably qualified healthcare professional that can advise you accordingly and make the
100%,
correct intervention. And there are also genetic tests that one can do, and we'll talk a bit about that. But you've got to have the right interpretation. What does it actually mean? If you go test your genes for certain, let's say for breast diseases or breast cancer, and you do that, you come out with the genes, what type of intervention are you going to make?
Yeah, and also what I find important, like I said, I have a personal experience of this, is the guy that's interpreting the results for you, explaining it to you correctly so you understand it. Because it's easy to sort of gloss over the tops and say, well, IGF is R and this and that, whatever. But unless you understand it, you don't really know what you need to do. So that's also important, is to go for the screening, have the right person interpret it, and then also have that person explain it to you in a way that you can understand, and you can make those interventions, because at the end of the day, it's up to you to change the way you eat, or change the way you supplement, or change the way you exercise, or whatever it is. But if you don't have the understanding of what you're trying to achieve, it's a bit you're kind of spinning your wheels.
Exactly. I'd like to move on to discussing and go into more specific details about screening tests, right, available for men and women, and then we can sort of like package them into different age groups.
Yeah.
But I suppose one of the commonest ones that people will be doing, and it's both men and in women, is the cholesterol and the blood pressure checks. Really, which I think funds may be saying from the age 30, one can potentially should start maybe a bit before that. But I'd add cholesterol, blood pressure, and your sugar should be done regularly. I would say annually, very important. And as I said, in terms of when you're getting the results, it's not just about being in the range, it's about where you are in the range. Cholesterol, I would suggest, often the screenings that are done, they just give you a total cholesterol. But actually, it's important to get a breakdown of that. Let's call it a lipid profile, because you have good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And it's quite important to know what that breakdown is. So yes, 5 may be the upper limit of total, but you'd actually want it a bit broken down further. And the average screening pharmacy type of checks don't do that. And I would potentially encourage people to actually maybe get more of a lipid profile and see what's happening there.
Definitely.
Have you had any experience with cholesterol tests?
I have. Probably 10 years ago, my cholesterol was high, and I went on a radical sort of a course. I got a bit of a scare, and I went on a radical course and pretty much cut out everything. And I was able to bring my cholesterol down quite significantly. I think cholesterol kind of runs in the family, if that's even a thing, because there's also the opinion polls are out on whether some of these things that you think are hereditary are. Nevertheless, I went on a radical course of cutting out stuff, and I got it down quite nicely. But then you kind of don't have a life because you can't eat anything. The golden rule was, if anything tastes good, don't eat it. And then after many years of resisting, because I'd heard all the negative stuff about statins, I finally went onto a statin, and that brought my cholesterol into control quite nicely. So, and that's pretty much where I am right now, is I do take a statin,
Right.
and my cholesterol is in control.
And I think your experience, what you've said, is that a lot of people go through that. They're going to try and diet, and they should. But if they get to a point that they just can't control it, and it's turning their life into a total nightmare, they should potentially speak to their health care provider and think about going on. And it's all balancing risk, right? What's the risk of having a high cholesterol versus taking a drug that's been around the market for many years and actually is quite a low impact, well, low side effect drug, let me put it like that, but actually has a high impact in terms of bringing the cholesterol down. And often the professionals say the benefits outweigh the risks.
Well, definitely, Avron. One of the incredible innovations of our time is the internet. And I've heard many doctors and many people say that they hate Google because everyone is a Google expert, so they have certain symptoms, they Google the symptoms, they say, oh my word, I've got this or I've got that. They go to the doctor telling him what they've got. And that can be, it's a good thing to do your research, but it can be a dangerous thing as well. And I certainly sort of was looking at all the negative effects of statins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I was so anti. And when I started to take them, I didn't find any perceivable negative benefits. I'm not to say what's happening on the inside. I don't understand that. But, so Google can be your friend, and it definitely can be something that puts you off doing something that you should really be doing.
Exactly. You got to be careful. You should do your own research, but discuss with a healthcare provider and a suitably, as we said, qualified specialist in the field.
Yeah.
And I think the same would apply for your blood pressure and your glucose that you're doing. So those are the basic screenings one should be doing annually, certainly above the 30 and above, but even when you're younger, you can start screening for that. Cholesterol, blood pressure, sugar, and HbA1c as well, which actually monitors, gives you an indication of your sugar control over 3 months. But there you're screening for your cholesterol, your blood pressure, and your diabetes, very prevalent disease in South Africa, and you can pick up where you are on the continuum. And even if you haven't got the disease, but you're getting close, you can make lifestyle interventions. The obvious point here is that the earlier you pick it up, if you're on the borderline, it's easier to do something through a lifestyle intervention than obviously having to go into the medications to treat those.
Something else that I would recommend is that you whatever lab you used first, use them all the time, because you can get their cumulative test results. So I've got test results over the last 6 to 8 years, and then you can see trends, but if you switch between laboratories, you don't get that sort of a trend. So I found that quite valuable.
Yes, and I think you brought up a very important point, which I noted down here to actually bring up to the listeners, is that keep a record. So if you're going to use the same lab so they can keep a record for you, and you'll get a printout. The other option is within your within your own record keeping abilities, keep a record every time you go to a test and what it looks like, a health diary, because the variation for your own variation is very important where you're sitting. And whether your levels are going up and down, it's important. So it may be sort of in the normal range, but it's going up. That's an important point to look at. Going down.
This sort of talks to the point that I mentioned just now, where going to a health professional that explains stuff to you, and also obviously has record of where you've come from, where you've been. Yes. And the doctor that I use, like I said, I have 6 to 8 years of records, and my father had prostate cancer, so there's obviously something that I was concerned about. And then again with Google, the prostate-specific androgen test, the PSA test, is there was also stuff around that, whether it's accurate and you actually had to, a lot of the times the research that I did was that you actually had to have the physical exam, which was a bit of a scary thing for me. And the doctor that I use took a look at my test results, and I raised the issue that I was concerned about prostate cancer. And he looked at my results and he said, no, you have no problem with that. We can tell from the PSA or the blood test that it's not going to be an issue. And the way that he explained it was just so well done and so clear, and like really struck home with me. Because my PSA had been, let's just use an example, 2.1, then 2.2, then 2.4, and then it went back down to 2.3. And he said, cancer never goes backwards. And that was a light bulb moment for me. He said, if you had a risk of cancer, it would have kept on going up. Now, a lot of doctors won't explain that. They'll just look at the test and they'll say, no, you're fine. But you still have those doubts in your mind. So now it's very, very clear to me. And I can even check that myself on my next screening test. If it stayed the same or gone backwards, then I'm happy.
There's definitely a light bulb moment. And that's, as you said, the importance of a professional. But I'm happy you brought up the prostate issue, because very important screening tool in men. 50% of men over the age of 50 will have some issue with their prostate. So it's something for men to look forward going forward. And 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in their lifetime. So it's a huge issue. And screening with doing the PSA, that's the blood test, to look for that marker from the age of 40 is suggested. And certainly from the age of 50, one should be doing that anal digital examination, which obviously it's pretty. One can think it's pretty unpleasant to have to go through, but it's very important in terms of the screening process to do that on an annual basis. And both the blood test and obviously the physical examination are important.
I must say that as men, we actually get off light. If that's the only type of a invasive screening that we have to have. Women go through this their whole lives, and it really sort of is something that sort of strikes a chord with me. Ladies have a lot more screening and issues and complications and that kind of thing that they have to go through their whole life. We actually have got off really easy. So,
you're right.
One of those things.
100%. Important point to make. And that obviously moves us on to the women, because for the men we've spoken about the cholesterol, the blood pressure, sugar, which is also important for women, the prostate and for men colonoscopy. But going on to women have the pap smears, right? Certainly from the age of certainly from the age of 20 and above, or if women are sexually active before that, they should be doing the regular pap smears. And it's a hugely important screening process. It should be done once a year, and can pick up. It's one of the most effective ways to pick up cervical cancer for women, and should be done on an annual basis. And women should be doing that. And certainly, what I found, certainly in the field where I practice, just women aren't necessarily doing these pap smears on a regular basis.
Well, Avron, I also have a personal story about that. A family member of mine, also a very healthy girl, similar age to me, about 59 years old, and she hadn't gone for her pap smear for about 6 years. She's kind of like, well, every year I go, and there's never an issue, so she kind of forgot about it. And she developed cervical cancer, which is a hectic thing.
Yeah, sure.
Extremely hard to treat. She had radiation. There's another thing as well. It depends on the hospitals that you go to, because some of the hospitals have integrated machines that are kind of like a shotgun. And then other of the better hospitals have really, really pinpoint precision machines. So she unfortunately went to a hospital that had a shotgun approach, and it caused quite a bit of damage to her. It was quite a sort of a thin line that she was walking. But she's fine now. But if she'd gone for her pap smears and hadn't missed those 6 years, she would never, ever have had this problem.
Yeah, no, I mean, so the stats show cervical cancer rates have dropped 75% since pap smears. So those who do it regularly on an annual screening basis, obviously are screening for that. Those who don't, there's a risk of that being missed. And as you've said, the implications are significant. It's a very severe cancer if you pick it up at a late stage. And the treatment of it damages the other urogenital organs. which obviously can have
Mm.
huge effects. And it's a relatively, yes, it's an invasive procedure, but it's a really simple procedure, pap smear, and has been very effective as a screening tool.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, the other big one for women is obviously the mammograms, right? Which we know breast cancer is probably the most prevalent cancer in adult females, and we all know individuals who obviously have been diagnosed because it's just so prevalent. And mammogram, it's an amazing screening tool. For women over the age of 40, it's definitely advised on either a once a year or by maximum once every 2 years, but has been very effective in terms of decreasing localized breast cancer, and it is a very significant screening tool. So one, women should self-examine and do a monthly examination of their breast just to check for lumps. But two, ultrasounds and mammograms are very important, and they should be seeing healthcare providers for this on an annual basis.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree.
Just like your other stories, I know numerous women that have actually, it gets picked up, it's too late. And then I know many cases as well that women are, they pick up early, they come in very early and they say, they've just noticed this lump or variation, and they have the mammogram and it's picked up and they can deal with it. Yeah.
No, screening is incredibly important. It really is. And I think the younger that you can start it, the better. I think I pretty much only started sort of health screening after about the age of 45. And, I didn't really have any issues, luckily, but I think that if there was a regular regimen of screening that was done across the board, I think that it would, A, save a lot of lives, B, save a lot of heartache, and C, save a lot of money, to replace somebody who in a business or in a country or whatever it is that is trained up in their job and is doing what they need to do and that kind of thing, and then to lose them, and also the pain and the trauma that you go through as a family, trying to support and assist a family member that's struggling with some other dreaded disease it's just not worth it. It's just worth it to get the screening done on a regular basis.
Exactly. Two areas or two screenings that may not be that prevalent, but people should be doing. And start firstly is mole screening. And we know living in South Africa, being exposed to the sun, and this is across all populations, but particularly in the white skin population, there's been a huge surge in terms of skin cancers, particularly melanomas. And I think I was reading some stats a couple of months back saying that South Africa surpassed Australia in terms of the incidence in the white skin population in terms of skin cancer. So it's very, very significant. And adults, as they hit the adult age, should be seeing their dermatologist every year, every 2 years for what we call mole mapping. That's the dermatologist will go through the body and map the moles and then actually watch those moles change. Have you seen any experience of that from individuals you've interacted in the gyms around mole screening, Grant?
I haven't, not necessarily in the gyms. I have had friends and colleagues that have developed melanomas, and what people don't realize is that it is an insanely aggressive form of cancer. Your skin's your biggest organ, and if it gets into you, it really, really gets into you. It's very difficult.
Exactly right. It's extremely invasive. And they tiny melanomas. And by the time you would notice it as a lay person, you can get to a dermatologist and it looks relatively small and not so serious. But it can be very significant. And the way it grows is not necessarily just growing, enlarging across your skin surface, but grows deep through the skin and metastasizes. And as you said, once you've picked it up and it's already started to spread, it's very difficult, and it's extremely aggressive tumor.
Yeah. I want to chat a little bit.
It's very important, and it's a very neglected area, and I think it should be emphasized that that people should be screening on their moles and having that checked out.
Mm.
And
I
really,
wanted
it's
to
something
check a little
especially
bit.
needs to do.
100%. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking I haven't done that for like 20 years, and I should be. So
Yeah,
my
well,
next
I hope
appointment's going to be
through
the
this, the point
dermatologist.
of our podcast exactly is to get people going. I mean, our whole aim after this is for people to say, you know what, the doc and Grant have actually made a clear point. I'm going to go do some screening, and start booking some tests. A lot of these are paid by the medical funds. It may not be paid entirely for these screenings mechanisms, but it's worth it, right? Even if they're paying a portion, you're paying a portion. From your health perspective, it's actually worth it.
100%.
The other one is the bone density scans for postmenopausal women. Often that is neglected, and it's quite important to actually see where they are sitting. We know that women can be quite affected postmenopausally in terms of osteoporosis or generally just weakening of the bones, and there are treatments available. And if that's not treated accordingly, they're much more susceptible to fractures as they age. But it's also neglected, those bone scans, and very important to do as women hit the menopausal and postmenopausal stage.
And also very important to dense up your bone is to do weight-bearing exercise. Your body reacts to what you put it through. So if you are a marathon runner and you're running 52-kilometer runs and that kind of thing, you're telling your body that I want you to be light and thin, and your body starts to shed, obviously, body fat. It starts to shed muscle and starts to shed bone. Whereas if you're doing weight training, your body says, well, my person needs me to be bigger and stronger. Let me dense up my bones. Let me dense up my muscles. So it's very some of the stuff that people do is counterproductive. I mean, I think marathon running is it's an odd sport. It's really an odd sport because it does a lot of damage to you. So you can definitely, take preventative measures in the gym. You can also go on, certain medications and supplements to assist your bones to stay strong and that kind of thing. But definitely weight training is probably one of the best things you can possibly do to keep your bone structure and bone density right.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. And I think it brings us into terms of, important. People look at the muscle and the fat analysis and the composition analysis. And we'll talk about that type of screening. But they forget about the bones. And by doing the exercise and the weight training and working, you actually are strengthening the bones. And that's important. And the younger you start, the very more important it is. Yes, we're saying screening and to do the test, the bone density scan, but we're talking about preventative medicine, and by preventative medicine, start exercising and doing those working those bones early on. It has a significant effect.
I think people have to get over the sort of illusion that if I have something wrong with me, I can take a pill to fix it. You actually need to get off your bum and start doing some exercise. Movement is medicine. And so many things can be prevented by just keeping yourself active. If you took a car and you parked it under a tree for 5 years and didn't drive it, you'd come back and the tires would be not worn, but damaged, and you couldn't drive on them. If those same tires had been driven on for a couple of kilometers per day, they'd still be in perfect condition. So your body's the same thing. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Exactly. And I think that leads us quite nicely into, which I want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about, is screening at gyms. And this is probably more your area of expertise, Grant, than mine. But sort of to start off, for the average individual, if there's someone to say, okay, I want to start some screening, but through my gyms or my gym, what type of test, what type of screening can I do at gyms?
So there's a couple of things we do. The first thing, as I mentioned earlier, is the physical activity readiness questionnaire. And that's sort of has a dual function. The first function of that is to make sure that we're not having somebody in our facility that is a massive risk to them. They start exercising and the first day they drop dead because they shouldn't have done it. So we ask a whole host of questions, something like 22 different questions And that is like, have you ever had a resting or stress ECG that was not normal? Our percentage yeses on it is 1.09%. Are you taking any medication on a regular basis? 12.76%. That's interesting. Are you under a lot of stress? 17%. Have you had cancer? That's at 1.19%. Coronary insufficiency or thrombosis, 0.45%. Diabetes, 2.8%. So suffer from arthritis, 4.39%. Hernias, 1.85%. Has a family member ever had anything listed in section A above? That's quite high, like 36%. So that is a bit of an indicator. Heart problems, 1.87%. High blood pressure, 8.74%. So those are the kind of questions that we ask the guys, and then based on their yes or no answer to those, we then sort of indicate whether they need to see their GP before they can start to exercise. We also, we'll do like sort of basic blood pressure tests and stuff like that, but it's obviously not a medical test. It's just a bit of an indicator, with a electronic machine that has multiple variables, but you definitely can pick up if someone has got a potential problem and refer them on to the health practitioner. We've also in the past had nurses from various pharmacies coming to the gyms on a regular basis. Every second week they'd come in, sit there for a couple of hours, and people come in and do some screening, obviously blood pressure, sugar, some of the basic tests, and our members really enjoyed that. And it was a good symbiotic relationship because our members would get something out of it. They'd get a bit of an indication of what their screening and their health is like. The pharmacy obviously had exposure, and everybody wins because if anything was picked up, then it's something that they could be referred to a health professional to get treated. So, then also you obviously have body composition analysis and that kind of thing, hydration level, bone density, muscle density, fat percentages, visceral fat, etc. So, but those are certainly just sort of like initial screenings or lead-in screenings that might raise a red flag. And once that red flag is raised, that member then needs to go and check that out more thoroughly. So it's more of a red flag than this is a conclusive.
I think what you're suggesting is that your gym will help you with awareness, right? I think that question is brilliant. I think it's great. It makes people aware, I actually haven't thought about that. Have I done this? Do I know this? Do I know this variable? I actually don't know, so it's another a point of someone's, of someone's health stuff, of bringing up information and saying, do you have this information, making people aware.
Absolutely.
And I think just doing the basic blood pressure, that's obviously extremely valuable. And I think the body composition analysis, I think in all the screening we spoke about, that's sort of the laboratory and the biomarkers. Not many people do that body composition analysis, which actually has a very important impact on your health, right? Your muscle fat to ratio.
Definitely. And also, the other part of it is that if you are doing the tests like every 3 months or so, it can be motivating because you see, well, I've lost some body fat or I've gained some muscle or whatever it is. So that kind of helps to keep you on the right path.
I've spoken about this. I think I've mentioned this before, but just to re-emphasize, probably the two most important indicators that can have an impact on your long-term health and wellness is one is your muscle mass. Because people think just muscle mass, okay, well, it's your strength, your stamina, how you can stand out, in terms of the weights you can pick up, etc. But actually, it's a very important metabolic organ in your body in terms of controlling and metabolizing for chronic diseases. So actually, to be shown at your gym, you actually should be improving your muscle mass or increasing. It's a very important screening tool. I would suggest that gyms potentially offer where maybe it's not so easy to get elsewhere. You can't walk in a lab and do your body composition analysis.
Yeah.
The other important one, which I'm not sure gyms do actively, but potentially should be doing, but we know medical aids and funds are, and like the new watches are, but I'm not sure how accurate that measurement is, but it is an indicator is VO2 max, right? how your body relates to oxygen and how much you need of it for a particular amount of exercise. So muscle mass and VO2 max are very important, I would suggest, screening indicators that gyms could potentially offer, which you can't get through your traditional health practices or places.
Look, I've always said that there's three things that belong in the same box, and that box is gyms, the medical profession, and insurers. Because, gyms have, we have anything from 15 to 25,000 visits a month. So we have very high exposure. People come to gym 3 to 5 times a week. So their chances to get some sort of a screen is really good. And obviously, if the screening process to some extent is happening at the gym, that's a bonus. If the people are getting healthier at the gym, that's a bonus. And if the insurers are lowering their claims ratios and having people that are living longer lives, more healthy, that's a bonus. So those three things kind of belong in a box together. And I've said that for the longest time. So I think that gyms have an important part to play in this, even if it's just to raise those red flags. And I think the collaboration, and you see this in some instances in America where they're all kind of jamming those, or not jamming, putting those three things into the same box. And it does yield good results, because not only are you getting the right results and high volumes of people coming through to do tests and that kind of thing, but you also have the ability to then make corrections. I look at wellness days that happen at companies, and every year the same group will go and do a wellness day, and it's like, all right, your staff are sick, your staff are this, they've got high blood pressure, see you next year. What's the point of that? You actually have to have some sort of intervention and steps that people can follow. And people need to be led into that and coached in that. It can't be just, here's your results, go home, and there you go.
Well, I think that's where gyms play a great role. I think once, as you said, to help you identify and red flag risk factors, it's a very healthy environment to be in, and it's something that you can be proactive about, right? So yes, you may need some medical and dietary interventions, but exercise plays a huge role in terms of preventing and also managing chronic disease. So that's where gyms, I see it as playing a very important role and part of the process. And it's not just, as you said, just a test and then go home and who knows what you're going to do. One question I do want to just ask you, Grant, I see our time is almost coming to an end. Would you say in general that individuals who come to gyms are and we're talking about, obviously, you do the initial questions, etc., but are just generally more aware about their health and the implications of what they need to do?
Definitely, Avron, definitely. The stats from our PARQs bear that out. The first time I looked at those stats, I was so surprised. And then I started to ask myself questions. We have a very, very, very healthy base. And I think that's a combination of a couple of things. Firstly, it's people that want to get healthy, number one. Number two, a lot of people who avoid the gym are unhealthy, and they're kind of nervous of what they're going to, how am I going to look, how am I going to feel, will I feel intimidated, etc. So in general, we have a fairly healthy crowd that comes to our gyms, and the stats bear that out. But the thing is to get onto that journey, understand that everybody's there for a reason. You might have to lose 20, 30 kilos or whatever it is. You're not going to be the only person there that needs to lose weight. I get aggravated when I see somebody that's overweight and they're complaining about the fact that they're overweight, and then they're sitting there eating like a bowl of ice cream and saying, oh, why am I overweight? That aggravates the hell out of me. But if somebody comes into one of our gyms and they want to make a change in their life, I don't care if they've got 600 kilos to lose. We'll help them all day, every day, because they want to make a positive change in their life. So the message from me is, come in, take charge of, don't complain about your predicament or your situation. Actually take charge of it. It doesn't have to be a gym. Start walking. Start doing something. Start moderating what you're eating, etc., etc. And then you can complain about the fact that you're trying to lose weight because you're actually doing something about it. But don't complain and then sit there doing all the wrong things. Sorry to be like a bit odd about this, but it's something that it does aggravate me.
No, I think that's a very important parting message, Grant, in terms of to leave our listeners with it. That's the importance of screening, and you've summed it up, why screening matters, because you are going to screen, you're going to find potentially that there are some biomarkers or other types of markers that are out of sync, and you're going to do something. And it's going to be a multitude of factors or that you're going to work on, but one of them is actually, exercising and taking control.
Yeah. So and the last thing that I want to say on that point that I made, Nana, is that I don't care if you're 30, 40, 50 kilograms overweight. If you're happy and that's the lifestyle you want, then by all means, everybody has to live the life that they want to live. You can never judge people on appearance or this or that or the next thing. It's completely irrelevant. It's not your life to live. I know people who are obsessive about health and fitness, and I wouldn't want their life. I wouldn't want to never eat this and never eat that, never drink this and never party and those kind of things. I want to lead a balanced life. So if you are, if you enjoy food and you're excessively overweight and that's the lifestyle that you love, I'm thumbs up for that. Yeah. It's a great thing. Everyone must live their own life.
Yeah, but I suppose that what we try to emphasize in terms of on our podcast, it's about health span. So when you live, you want to actually be able to be the most effective functional person that you can. And that's why health span is important, to make sure that you are healthy enough to do what you want to do at every decade that you live at. So it's not just about lifespan, because you can live 100 years but be extremely unhealthy, unfit, and can't do anything, but being able to do what you want to do. And that's why actually screening matters. And that's the importance of getting out there and being proactive and doing the screening that you can to actually give you that health span that will actually give you a better quality life.
100% agree.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Grant Austin, who's head of a national chain of gyms around South Africa. Thanks for sharing your pearls and your insight with us on the podcast. And we look forward to doing many more with you. You've got so much to share. So I look forward to that as we go to next year. There will be one further podcast where we bring on a lot of the guests we've had over the last couple of months for some tips as we go into the festive, silly season, as they say. But that will be coming out in the next week or two. But great to have all your listeners having listened tonight to Let's Talk Health and Wellness. We look forward to the next podcast coming up in the next week or two.
Thank you, everyone. Always a pleasure to be on.
Thanks, Grant. Cheers.
Okay, bye-bye.
Let's talk.